Braves and baseball fans, it's time to take a trip from coast to coast across Major League Baseball.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
One strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed a perfect game.
Fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! Yes! The Atlanta Braves have given you a championship. Listen to this crowd.
Left side, Swanson to first. Braves, world champions.
Braves and baseball talk, straight from the diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation.
Here's Grant McAuley.
Hello and welcome to From the Diamond. I am Grant McAuley. These are the Kia studios of Sports Radio 92.9 The Game on a Sunday afternoon. We got a lot of stuff to get into as far as the week that was for the Braves, who keep their winning ways going. But man, the injuries continue to be a story for the Atlanta Braves here in 2026 as well, as they have yet another test that they're looking to pass. And the test is, how long will they be without arguably their best player this year and catcher Drake Baldwin, who's making himself a heck of an all-star case. It might still have the time to do that, obviously, if he can get back sooner than later and be a part of that. And we anticipated being sooner than later, but there's just no way to know with oblique injuries. So we'll talk a lot about that and the effect that that has on this Braves club. But in the big picture, Atlanta continues to soar to heights that we have not seen in years and years and years when it comes to the kind of start that they're off to. And we've been talking about it quite a bit over the first, 7, almost 8 weeks of the season now as we approach Memorial Day, which is the, I think, first checkpoint of baseball season where you really start to look around and take stock of the division, take stock, obviously, of where your team is at and how things are starting to, I guess, percolate a little bit in regards to playoff pictures and things of that nature. Still too early for me for like wild card talk, although it matters if you're one of those clubs that's kind of in that place where you are within shouting distance of one of those. There is, as that saying goes, a lot of baseball left to be played, but you do have to start feeling a little bit more, I guess, confident in what you've seen thus far, even if you know that over the course of a marathon baseball season, there are highs and there are lows. There are ebbs and there are flows, and there are so many other things that don't rhyme that are opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to the game of baseball. And the beautiful thing about the game of baseball is, I love to say, is there's another game tomorrow until there's not. And the Braves still have a lot of tomorrows ahead of them, but they're trying to figure out, I think, the best way to navigate some of the challenges. And I would say that test after test for Walt Weiss and his coaching staff, for the Braves, positional players, their pitchers, whether rotation, whether bullpen, and then obviously leaning into some good things that have been grown on the farm here to help them out. The Braves have been able to pass all those tests. And it's crazy to look at this, I think, in the spectrum of when this whole thing got started way back around Valentine's Day in Northport, Florida. There was a lot of unknown about what the Braves were going to look like this year. There was, and there are, obviously, an optimistic portion of the fan base that's thinking, okay, last year was a bad year. A lot of guys got hurt. A lot of guys didn't perform. They've had a winter to get back up to speed, get healthy. I feel a little bit good. Hope springs eternal. And then there's a portion of the fan base that might have been more cautiously optimistic, like, well, I don't know. We may not have done enough in the offseason to really address some of our needs. There's still a lot of unknown. They're going to have to prove it to me, and I think that's perfectly fair as well. And then there is, I would say, a very vocal minority that just, no matter what happened, they weren't going to be happy because the Braves have just let them down, and a loss is the worst thing that can happen to you, no matter how few of them there are, no matter how many of them there are. You live in that state of heightened anxiety and overall, I think, too much cortisol. Be that as it may. I think everybody can look at this Braves season thus far objectively and say they have far exceeded reasonable expectations of what this club should be doing. While the National League East, meanwhile, looks nothing like what people thought that it was going to look like if you start to look at some of the expert predictions or the greatest fears of Braves fans that, hey, look, the Mets are spending a lot of money. They're going to be up there toward the top. The Phillies have had our number. They're going to be up there towards the top. Well, both of those teams, you talk about going through it. I mean, the Braves have had their challenges this year. There's no two ways about it. But the Phillies, who've already fired their manager, Rob Thompson, after inking him to a 2-year extension over the winter, which was about 6 months on the job for him, of which he managed about a month's worth of that. And then you got the Mets, who it's hard to explain what exactly happens to that club. It defies logic. But there were questions coming in I think, to the season for that team, and those questions have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. They've multiplied. They've gotten louder, and I don't think they're any closer to finding the answers up there. But I will tell you this, the Phillies have played a better brand of baseball under interim manager Don Mattingly. So as we sit here around Memorial Day, which is the point of all this and why I bring all of that up for the context of it, I don't think you're ready to write anybody off. And I don't think anybody around here, professionally speaking, is ready to declare that the NL East is over, like we heard a few years ago, because we learned a very valuable lesson. You don't count people out. And we've also learned, on the flip side of that lesson, the other side of that coin, you do not have to win a division to be going far in October and doing big things in October. So however you can get there in the postseason is obviously the goal. So I don't think anybody is going to completely overlook and write off the Phillies, especially since they seem to have righted the ship, even if they slowed down a little bit this week and maybe took on a little bit of water. But the Braves overall have checked all of the boxes that they've needed to thus far. And I went back and looked at how long it took Atlanta to win its 14th series, which is what they did in Miami to start the week by taking 3 out of 4. Got absolutely pounded in game 1, 12-0, shutout. Drake Baldwin goes on the IL, and then I think, that group that I was talking about where if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. We're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Well, they were ready to say, here it comes for the Braves. Here it is, regression. Here it is. They're going to take that big step backwards and undo all the great things that they'd done over the first 50-ish games of the year. And that didn't happen. The Braves turned around and somehow in that series ended up outscoring the Marlins despite losing game 1 12-0. That says a lot. It says the Braves started scoring runs like they're supposed to, and the Marlins, well, they had a little bit more trouble with it. And you take 3 out of 4. And that's been a place where the Braves have historically had a lot of success. So the Drake Baldwin news is what it is. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along in the show. It's definitely a gut punch for a lineup that, has some guys that I think are performing pretty well. Some guys who have been looking to get healthy and looking to get their seasons on track for a while. And then they've got some unsung heroes that are in there. And we're going to talk to one of those a little bit later on. I got a chance to catch up with Mauricio Dubon. I kind of pick his brain a little bit about how he's fitting in with this club, what he sees from this club, and his versatility, which has been universally praised. And I don't think there's been any louder praise being sung than that of Walt Weiss, who we've had a chance to talk to a lot this year about what Mauricio Dubon has done to really just set up this club for success in a lot of different ways, because you can ask him to do just about anything you need to in the field and just about anything you need to or anywhere you need to put him in the batting order. Hey, he's ready to chip in there. And he does something that I think it's hard to quantify, and we're going to hear Walt Weiss talk a little bit more about this later on. The clutch gene, maybe something that not a lot of people subscribe to. You know it when you see it. You appreciate it every time it shows up, and for some guys, it's more often than not. And I think Mauricio Dubon has just had a knack, at least over the first couple of months of the season, of being a guy that when the Braves really need something or something's going on that could be a rally that changes a game, somehow his name's in there a lot. And that's great to see. And it just adds to the depth of this club with what he's able to do. And I do think this is a club that has its best depth in at least a decade and a half. And I think folks have kind of asked, what kind of, label could you put on Mauricio Dubon in terms of, what kind of player he is? What kind of comp can you throw out there? And I think he's kind of a Martin Prado type. If you remember those days. I think a lot of Braves fans remember those days pretty fondly. Martin was a very well-respected teammate, which Mauricio Dubon can check that box as well. These guys love him, and he loves being an Atlanta Brave. He loves this opportunity, and you'll hear him talk about it a little bit later on. And then the fact that you needed a shortstop, he's got you. Need somebody to put out in center because your center fielder's kind of dealing with an injury, he's got you. Need to start him in left field? Okay, he'll take that glove too. Need to give your third baseman a day off? He could do that. Same thing if you need to do so for your second baseman, your right fielder, pretty much anything you need him to do. You don't want him to catch. I'll stipulate that because anytime somebody who's not a catcher is catching, things have gone terribly wrong. Folks ask me every year, who's the Braves emergency catcher? I was like, if you get the answer to that question and you actually see it, I'm going to tell you that is a very bad day for the Atlanta Braves. And thankfully, we haven't had to see that, knock on wood, even though the catching depth has been tested. And we'll get into that more later. I also don't want to see Mauricio Dubon starting at first base anytime soon because the Braves have an Iron Man over there who's got a consecutive game streak, and I think that's something that deserves, obviously, its own level of accolades and praise because Matt Olson has been that guy since he's come over from the Oakland Athletics at that time. The future Las Vegas Athletics, the current Sacramento Athletics. They're really trying out some names. They're workshopping it here, trying to get this whole thing figured out. But regardless, what's added up thus far for the Braves has come out to the best record in baseball. And as I was getting to, how long did it take them to win their 14th series of the year last year? They did it in game number 51 this year. It took the Braves 39 series last year to win 14 of those series. It was game number 121, and it was the middle of August. It was a long, hard year last year. I don't know if anybody needs to be reminded of that. We've already promised to stop talking about the first week of the season last year and how bad that was. And we have, because those demons, I think, have been properly exercised by the start that the Braves are off to. But it does bear repeating that this club this year is doing some really special things. They're off to their best start since at least 1997 at this point, if you're looking at a 52-game start for the Braves. I mean, how good have they been? Coming into Saturday's game, the Braves at 36-16 matched that 1997 team. And only the 1998 Braves, who have a song written about them, got off to a better 52-game start at 38-14. And this pitching staff, which, again, even on Saturday, even in a loss, 2 runs allowed across the 9 innings that were pitched. Another big, I think, great performance that you needed to see from Grant Holmes, who appears to be finding his footing after a couple of shorter starts. But this pitching staff has its lowest ERA as a staff since the 2014 team, which was kind of an odd year for the Braves. But their pitching that year was very good. There was a lot of offensive questions about that club back then. But that club had a 2.97 ERA. And I believe this year's club has an ERA just over 3. And if you're looking for how is this happening for the Atlanta Braves, let me get you to that portion of the show. I like to remind you every week. If you score more runs than the other guys and you allow fewer runs than the other guys, in the pantheon of Major League Baseball, you're going to be in a pretty good spot. And the Braves offense, as we've talked about last week at length, if you haven't heard that, I got to sit down with Tim Hires, Austin Riley as well, Michael Harris, and talk about how the Braves have kind of brought their offense to a different level this year under Tim Hires and company. Check that out. It's in the archives wherever you get your podcasts on the Odyssey app. Just search for From the Diamond. You'll find it there. But the Braves are second in runs scored to the Washington Nationals, which, look, the Nats, they're putting some things together. The pitching's still a question, but these are the top 2 offenses in baseball. I would not have guessed that. You could have given me 100 guesses or 100 different ways to put it in and say, all right, top 2 offenses in baseball, who are they? I would not have said the Atlanta Braves were going to be at that stratosphere. I thought they'd be improved. And I certainly wouldn't have given the Nationals the best scoring team in baseball moniker, but that is exactly what they're carrying, that mantle. Braves are second in homers only to the New York Yankees, first in OPS as an offense. You do those kind of things, you're setting yourself up for success. The pitching staff, though, is stellar. First in ERA, at, again, just over 3, and first with the lowest opponent's batting average as well. So you add all those things up. And that's why the Atlanta Braves are sitting on a nice, tidy 36-17 start. Sunday's game makes 54 games. That marks 1/3 of the way through the season as we approach Memorial Day. The Braves are off on Monday. This is a nice little checkpoint to size up what the Braves have done, and that's exactly what we're going to do on this edition of From the Diamond. We've got a lot to hear from Walt Weiss about. We're going to do some of that in this show. As I mentioned, I got to sit down with Mauricio Dubon and talk a little bit with him about his fit with the Atlanta Braves this year and what he's seeing as a member of this club. And my buddy Gaurav Vedak of Battery Power is going to join me to talk about some Braves prospects who are off to incredible starts this year as the Braves farm system is looking about as good as it has in the better part of a decade. That is all in your future right here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Baseball, talking Braves and beyond. Baseball with From the Diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game here on a Sunday afternoon. We'll be walking you up to the Braves and Nationals getting started Game 3 of their series. Hope you're all enjoying having a safe Memorial Day weekend out there as we honor those who have served our country. And we enjoy ourselves, hopefully some good food and some fellowship as well before your Memorial Day weekend is done. Braves will actually be off on Monday, and then they will hit the road. So no local baseball on Memorial Day. That's it almost hurts my soul a little bit as a longtime baseball person. But the Braves certainly deserve a day off. They have been playing a very long string of games. This has happened a couple of times this year. It'll happen a couple of more times. And with long strings with no time off, sometimes you end up talking about the injury bug, which has once again bitten the Atlanta Braves. And this was one that we really didn't want to talk about at any point this year. Not that there's ever a good time for an injury, but let me lay it out for you. The Braves brought Sean Murphy back off the injured list. He immediately went back on within about a week or so, as he has a broken finger on his left hand, his catching hand, which was suffered on, of all things, a catcher's interference. So when the bat hit the glove, that is not usually good for the fingers. And unfortunately for for Sean. I asked Walt Weiss about the timetable for this, and he said with broken bones, we're anticipating a couple of months. And so 2 months without Sean Murphy automatically tested you. You go out, you re-sign Sandy Leon, who had been in the Braves minor league system for the last couple of years. And we saw Sandy briefly at the big leagues at the big league level last year. A longtime veteran, very capable, known mostly, I think, for his time with the Red Sox and his time as a teammate of Chris Sale's. Everybody knows and understands what Sandy brings to the table. But then you're thinking, all right, well, the Drake Baldwin DH thing can still kind of be a deal because at least he's got somebody to work with. He'll have to catch a little bit more with no Sean Murphy, but this is workable. And the next thing you know, it's an oblique strain, a grade 1 strain for Drake Baldwin, suffered in the loss to Miami to start out the week, a 12-0 defeat. So let's hear from Braves manager Walt Weiss, who gives us a little bit of an update on exactly where Drake Baldwin stands with this oblique injury.
It's hard to say. I mean, obliques are just, they have a mind of their own, it seems like. You know, I've seen them take a long time. The fact that it's a grade 1 is a good thing. Could have been a lot worse. So I don't have a timeline, but I don't think it's going to be crazy long.
And that's a good thing to hear, right? I mean, even though you don't have the answers, you don't have the clarity yet, the grade 1, much like we saw with Ronald Acuna Jr., who was activated from the injured list. So there's, I guess, a counterbalance to this. You get one of the best players in baseball back and hopefully can get him rolling and helping you out to get some things going while you don't have the guy that had been your best or most consistent hitter thus far this season. So good to have Ronald back. We'll talk a little bit more about him later. But as far as Drake is concerned, the real shame of this, obviously, is not only the effect that it has on the club, but you look at a player who's come up, was given an incredible responsibility last year to be the starting catcher on opening day, moving forward, and make that jump. And all he did was handle it about as capably as anybody could have possibly asked, and wins the Rookie of the Year award. And he comes out for a sophomore season, and you can put that slump talk, you can go ahead and put that in a box and leave it out by the curb, because what he did was, as an encore, start looking like he could be the starting all-star catcher for the National League this year with an incredible season. So Walt Weiss talked a little bit about what Drake has done this year and the unfortunate side of losing somebody who's having such a good year.
I mean, he's been unbelievable. It's tough to lose a bat like that. I got to tell you, I mean, we lose him, one of the best hitters on the team, and went out and scored a bunch of runs. I think it speaks to the depth and the talent of the lineup. Hard to do, you know, you pull a guy out like that, the guy that's having an MVP type year, and you go out and score a bunch of runs the next 3 nights. So that's a good thing, good sign. And but it's going to be fun when we have everybody back in there at the same time. It's going to be fun to watch.
It certainly will be. And the Braves have been anticipating kind of getting the whole band together here, because you were waiting for Ha-Seong Kim and Sean Murphy for a long time. Kim is back. It's been a slow start for him, but we'll get into that a little bit more later. But you wanted to be adding reinforcements, not saying, okay, let's get this player back and then let's send this one to the IL. But that has been the way that it has gone thus far. But Drake Baldwin has been just ridiculously good, ridiculously consistent, and ridiculously clutch for the Braves thus far this year. You just look across this line, a better than 2 WAR season already in the first couple of months. Just start to do the math. You're talking about a 6, 7, maybe more F-WAR season by a catcher. You can count them on one hand, how many guys are going to be doing that every year. This is a position that I think over the last 15 or 20 years, there's become a dearth of quality, everyday, starting catchers that can give you that kind of production and that kind of value. And Drake Baldwin has done that thus far. He's hitting .303 with 13 home runs on the year. He'd knocked in 28 runs. He'd scored 39 runs in 40 games. I mean, he was in the middle of absolutely everything, and he was one of your best clutch hitters to boot. So just unfortunate. There's never a good time for it, as I'm sure everybody realizes, but you just got to find ways to score runs, and the Braves have been able to do that. That was what Walt Weiss was alluding to. You get beat 12-0. You lose Drake Baldwin to the IL. You feel like, okay, well, we could be trending in the wrong direction. Well, instead, you welcome Ronald Acuna Jr. back, and then you outscore the Marlins the next 3 games, take 3 out of 4 in the series, and roll right on home and have yourself a very exciting come-from-behind win against the Nationals on Friday night. So some good things have happened, more so offensively than not, even though yesterday notwithstanding, Saturday's game notwithstanding, the Braves offense still keeps finding ways to score some runs and to win some games, and that's a huge, huge difference over what we were seeing a year ago. I laid these stats out when we were talking about talking to Tim Hires last week and kind of sharing just how good the Braves have gotten. They were bottom third of the league in the first half as far as a run-scoring team. Final couple of months, some things started to click, and the Braves were creeping up into the top 10 again. This year, they have vastly overperformed what last year was by becoming one of the top 2 or 3 offenses in baseball, pretty much since day one. So Walt Weiss talked a little bit about what some of the differences are between last year's team and what the 2026 team is doing so far.
In terms of our record, it does. I mean, you could say there are a number of things, but it's hard to put your finger on just one thing. Like most of the time, it's a combination of a lot of things. But it was important to get off to a good start. That always creates momentum. But, I like the fabric, the makeup of our team. And it's more well-rounded than it was a year ago. I talked about us being more multi-dimensional offensively. That was one of the biggest goals offensively. I think we've done that so far. We've scored in a variety of ways. Where in the past, we'd outslug you and we'd hit homers. But if that didn't happen, sometimes it could go a little flat. And there's always going to be ebbs and flows to offense in this league because the pitching's so tough. But I feel like our offense is accomplishing that, being more multidimensional, keeping the line moving, scoring with 2 out, 2 strike singles, and that type of thing. And then, not just hitting the ball in the seats. We can still do that too. But, yeah, so there's a number of things, when you look at last year compared to this year. But we've gotten on a roll. Our bullpen's really good. The starting rotation has been really good. So it's a lot of things. But, yeah, it seems worlds apart from last year.
That worlds apart would be a great way to put it. And the question was kind of, I guess, phrased as to what a difference a year makes for the Atlanta Braves. And quite simply, it has made a huge difference. And we talked about some of the numbers when we opened up the show. The Braves have scored the second most runs in all of baseball. They've hit the most home runs in the National League. Only the Yankees have hit more home runs. And then the Braves pitching staff is doing its part on the other side. And that was where a lot of the questions really began as soon as spring training camp opened for the Braves, because you had Spencer Schwellenbach and Hurston Waldrop going down. Then at the end of spring training, you had Spencer Strider landing back on the injured list. It felt like some things could go wrong. And if I told you that all those things were happening and that Reynaldo Lopez was going to have to leave the rotation before April's over and go start working in the bullpen again, it's fair to wonder where exactly are all the innings coming from. But you've had guys step up and do some things that have really bridged the gap for the Braves. You're getting Cy Young performance from Chris Sale. No question about that. He's a future Hall of Famer, and it's nice to have one of those on your staff. You got Bryce Elder pitching at a consistent level that I think outshines his first half that got him All-Star honors in 2023. And not only do I think that, Bryce Elder thinks that. And the confidence, the execution, we're seeing it every fifth day. This is a guy who's pitching the best baseball that he has pitched in his career. So those two, that leads your rotation. Then you're starting to get performances from Spencer Strider that look a little bit more vintage. You're getting some performances from Grant Holmes that I think have been pretty important. And you've also gotten Martin Perez kind of out of nowhere as a swing man, making starts when he needs to, coming out of the bullpen when he needs to. And J.R. Ritchie also has chipped in as well with what the Braves have been able to do in rotation. And you'll see some other guys. There's some other guys that are going to make some starts this year, hopefully for the Braves. And we'll talk a little bit more about some timetables for some reinforcements once we move into the second half. But just looking at it from 2025 versus 2026 is a night and day difference for the Braves, who are sitting atop the National League as far as run differential is concerned, just ahead of the LA Dodgers. Plus 103 is a run differential for the Atlanta Braves. And if you're just curious, it's just add up all the games and how much are you outscoring the other team by. It's just when you have a positive one, you feel like you should be a 500 or better team, typically. It's just a nice little litmus test for that. Every other team in the National League East is a minus 15 or more run differential. Phillies are minus 22, Washington minus 15, Miami minus 15, New York minus 17. That's just telling you they're being outscored by a lot. And the Mets are having a lot of trouble scoring runs. But, I would say that as far as the pitching questions they've had to deal with, they've managed to find some answers and have probably the second best pitching in the division. But the problem is you got to score runs. So they're sitting in last place. 13 and a half games back as we approach Memorial Day are the Mets. Then you've got the Miami Marlins, who are 12 games back. And in fourth place, Washington is 10 games back. Philadelphia, 9.5 games back of the Braves, who have the largest division lead in all of baseball by a considerable margin. I think the Tampa Bay Rays are next up. They've got a 5.5 game lead over the New York Yankees in the East over on the American League side, and that is a team that has certainly hit its stride as well. So it'll be interesting to see as time bears on and we get into this next third of the season, how do some teams start to adjust, and as the weather warms up, what does it start to look like as we get into the summer? And then, of course, roll on past the All-Star break, get into those dog days, the trade deadline, all the little mile markers that are out in front of us. But at 36-17, the Braves' best record in all of baseball at this Memorial Day checkpoint is definitely a beautiful thing to see. Getting back to Drake Baldwin, though, Game 1 of that 4-game series against the Marlins. He suffered that grade 1 oblique strain. Again, no timetable for him getting back. But it did force the Braves into a very, very, I would say, precarious position with their catching depth, because not only did Sean Murphy end up on the injured list, but when you activated Sean Murphy, you had a bit of a gimpy Michael Harris, who was DHing and wasn't quite up to, because of a quad injury, playing the outfield. And then Ronald Acuna Jr. landed on the IL. So you had to, I think, value your outfield depth differently. And Jonah Heim was the guy that got put on waivers and claimed by the Athletics and was no longer part of your picture. You go out and you sign Sandy Leon. And then when Baldwin landed on the IL, you bring back a familiar face and a guy who I think gets a lot of respect. A lot of respect from pitchers and a lot of respect from the guys that have played with him the past few years, and that's Chadwick Trump. That's not a name that you look at the start of the year and you start thinking, all right, what are we going to get from Chadwick Trump? How is that going to help us win? But hey, look at Friday night. He didn't even start that game. And he ended up being part of not one but 2 rallies that helped the Braves get yet another walk-off, another come-from-behind win, which has been a hallmark of this Braves club. They've been having come-from-behind wins. They've been winning at a higher clip than anybody. They're getting the pitching they need, they're getting the hitting they need, and they're taking advantage of winning the series finales a lot more this year than they have been in the past as well. And that's the kind of thing that's in the DNA of a winning club. Not all the news on the injury front was bad. We talked about Drake Baldwin and what it's done to the Braves catchers side of things, but Ronald Acuna Jr. returned from the IL. 27-game on-base streak ended on Saturday, unfortunately, but if you're just looking at that 27-game sample, which I certainly am, Acuna slashing 284, 393, 441. You want to see more power, there's no question about it, and I believe it's there, and we'll see it. And this will just be one of those times where you just kind of wonder, and then you'll see Ronald get himself back on track there. But 21 runs scored across those 27 games as well. The power hadn't shown up yet, but getting on base and setting the table is something the Braves need with no Drake Baldwin to help them at the top of the order. But I need some other guys to get going too. We'll talk a little bit more about some of those pieces and how exactly they fit. But when we come back, a little bit of injury news for you. And by a little bit, I mean a lot, about some different Braves pitchers and what the impact could be on the Atlanta rotation and the Atlanta bullpen and Atlanta's pitching plans, Atlanta's trade deadline plans. A lot of moving parts. Stick with me. It's From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Now, more From the Diamond with Grant McAuley.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90-NATION. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game on this Sunday afternoon, Memorial Day weekend. We got to talk a little bit about injuries. Yep, we already talked about Drake Baldwin. That's one that you could have done without. The words of Tommy Boy. Could have done without that. But you got to get past it. Good teams do, and the Braves are certainly a very good team, and they've had more than their fair share of pitching injuries, dating all the way back to last year. And one of the guys that I think is at the head of the table, unfortunately, when you start talking about being dealt a rough hand as far as injury is concerned, is Spencer Schwellenbach. Exploded onto the scene as a rookie in 2024. Really found his footing very quickly at the big leagues. Got a 6-7 pitch mix, high 90s fastball, multiple versions of his fastball, good breaking stuff, good off-speed stuff, and a great mentality. If you were to create a pitcher in a factory and give him a whole bunch of the right attributes, I think Spencer Schwellenbach, you could argue, would be the final product for that. He was tremendous in 2024 and even better in the first half of 2025. He's leading the National League in innings pitched. Looked like he was on his way to an all-star team, but unfortunately, he was on his way to the injured list because he suffered a fractured elbow while pitching. That set him back. But by the time he got to the end of the season and into the winter, both he and Grant Holmes, who was dealing with an elbow issue of his own, were able to go into the offseason, have their throwing programs with the idea of being ready for spring training. But once there, while Grant Holmes has been able to make his way in and through the season and contribute to the Braves pitching staff, Spencer Schwellenbach immediately ran into trouble in the form of bone chips in his elbow. Had to get those removed. So he had the setback after a setback and has been on the 60-day IL to start the year, and there's not been a whole lot talked about when it comes to timetable for Spencer Schwellenbach, but I noticed something pretty good at the ballpark this week. Spencer Schwellenbach in full uniform walking back in with his glove. So I went ahead and asked the man himself, how are things going? Looks like you've been able to get out and get some activity going. He's like, yep, I was able to start throwing. It'll be 6 days ago now. He's throwing every other day from 60 feet at this point. Then if that goes well, after a couple of weeks, he'll move out to 75 feet. If that goes well, then he said, hopefully, this is, I guess I would say I'm adding this, my own commentary, fingers crossed. you get to start throwing off a mound. There'll be a lot of work that's going to come after and to get you back into the rotation, certainly, and Spencer Schwellenbach's well aware of that, but you wanted to get to that first step where you started throwing again. So I asked Walt Weiss a little bit about how the Braves are sizing things up and where they see Spencer Schwellenbach on his road to recovery and hopefully rejoining the Braves rotation at some point, I would imagine, in the second half.
No timeline for Schwelle yet. He's just now playing light catch at 60 feet, so he's got a long way to go. But the most recent tests and whatever exams were encouraging, very encouraging, all things considered. So I think it's positive, but for a pitcher, it just takes so long. They got to not only get healthy where they're throwing 100% again, but then now you got to go build them up, and that takes a lot of time. So it's a long road back for a starting pitcher.
Yeah, and that's completely understandable because there is no rushing it. And with Spencer Schwellenbach, you want to be able to check every single one of those boxes and be back and making some kind of impact, hopefully this year. It sounds like that's not something that needed to be quite as doom and gloom as it appeared to be online at times, because when you don't hear much, you just kind of start to wonder, all right, well, when can we expect this guy to be back? But he has been working hard behind the scenes, had a good visit with doctors a couple of weeks ago, got the all clear to start playing catch. That has begun, and as you heard from Walt Weiss there are a lot of steps to go to get him on the mound. Then he'll ramp up his intensity on the mound. Then he will face hitters at some point. He'll be heading down to Florida to do all that work, which is where he will probably run into a couple of other Braves pitchers we're about to talk about. And then at some point, for all the men that we're going to discuss, they're going to need a lengthy rehab assignment to build themselves back up, especially if they're going to be jumping back into the Braves rotation, which is where you would imagine that not only Spencer Schwellenbach, but A.J. Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrop could make some contributions this year if they're able to get back to full strength and be healthy. It could be very interesting to see what the Braves rotation starts to look like in late June, early or mid-July, or perhaps in August. Again, no timetable for any of the three yet, but they're all trending in the right direction. And in particular, I asked Walt Weiss about where A.J. Smith-Shawver is because he was dealing with Tommy John surgery that he underwent in June of last year. So it's been about a year, but A.J. Smith-Shawver, it sounds like, is starting to ramp some things up down in Northport.
AJ's coming along, man. I mean, I think the next step for him is facing hitters live. I mean, he's throwing some bullpens. He and Waldrop both, I think, I don't know who's out in front there, but they've both been throwing bullpens and throwing them with high intensity. So the natural next step is facing hitters live. I don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but they're coming along.
And that's a good thing to hear because you just need to be making some steady progress, and A.J. Smith-Shawver's doing that. He was tremendous in 9 starts last year, 3-2 record, 3.86 ERA. He has 42 strikeouts across his 44 1/3 innings, and it really seemed like he had finally been able to fine-tune that arsenal, which is something that for young pitchers can take a minute because he was thrown into the big leagues at 20 years old. Gosh, a lot like Didier Fuentes, who we're going to be talking about on this show as well. And sometimes that's just a baptism by fire because you may have the arm talent, but do you have all of the other necessary tools to go through a major league lineup 2 or perhaps 3 times if you want to be a starting pitcher? Or do you trust your secondary stuff enough to be able to make the pitches that you need to against big league hitters who are going to adjust a heck of a lot faster? In the minor leagues, talent will get you a long way, and you will be able to out-talent a lot of guys, but you will not be able to do that as much in the big leagues until you have done all of the things and checked all of those boxes developmentally speaking to be able to compete at the highest level. But A.J. Smith-Shawver is making some progress there, and you heard Hurston Waldrop as well. He's been down in Florida. He is throwing some bullpens, and so for both of those guys, once they're able to do that, once they're able to face hitters, then you start to look at what the rehab assignment would look like, and this is the same for Spencer Schwellenbach. Pitchers get 30 days. Now, you can, in the case of long-term injuries, ask for an extended rehab assignment. If you feel like that's in the best interest of the player, then obviously the league can grant that for you. But we don't want to necessarily start filing for extensions like that right now, but that is what the general timetable looks like. Once they go out on a rehab assignment, you can pretty much start that 30-day clock, if nothing else, to have a general idea when 1, 2, or 3 of these guys could be back in your rotation. But just by process of how far along guys are, it looks like Smith-Shawver and Waldrop are significantly ahead of Spencer Schwellenbach. So if I were to spitball it here, you're probably looking at August or a little bit later for Spencer Schwellenbach. But if he gets back at all this year and looks anything close to what he's looked like before, it's a first world problem. You'll be very happy to start moving pieces in your rotation around and figuring that out. But with that in mind, with all of this in mind, I don't know how much you can necessarily for the Braves let that affect your desire to go out and shop around the trade deadline and see if you can get somebody who is a true difference maker in your rotation. Not to take anything away from the talents or the abilities of these guys if they are able to get back and be healthy, but if you can get that front of the rotation guy, the guy that you can put with Chris Sale and create a two-headed monster, and hey, maybe Spencer Strider is back in that conversation as well, and you're able to supercharge your rotation, that would be a pretty interesting place to be. And the Braves have a little bit more dry powder, courtesy of their left fielder failing a drug test. So perhaps that money would be reallocated to finding somebody who might be earning a good chunk of change. So we'll speculate about the trade deadline a little further down the line. We just got to Memorial Day. I'm trying to not necessarily put the cart in front of the horse, but the Braves' rotation has looked good. Their bullpen has looked good, and both of those could benefit. But there have been some questions in this rotation beyond just injury, because Reynaldo Lopez was yet another of the guys that last year missed significant time. In fact, he made one start. It was really, if you want to go back and look at where the snowball started rolling for Braves pitching injuries last year, it was Reynaldo Lopez after his first start going down with a shoulder issue, having surgery, and not making it back. Then you could start looking at all of the other pieces that ended up falling apart before you could get out of July, including Chris Sale breaking his ribs in a fluke injury, the Spencer Schwellenbach elbow injury, the Grant Holmes elbow injury, and a host of other things. And Spencer Strider really just trying to find himself when he was finally able to get back. He just never had a rotation that was anywhere close to full strength. And interestingly enough, the Braves didn't go out and invest in a whole bunch of starting pitchers. In fact, they looked at some guys and said, hey, some of these guys are going to have to get healthy, and they're going to have to contribute because this is who we've got. And they just didn't find that deal that made sense. And some of the veteran pitchers that people were clamoring for have really not looked great. I mean, Chris Bassett hasn't looked good. If you're one of those who's like, oh, I don't know, I might roll the dice on a Justin Verlander or a Max Scherzer. It's a big name, great resume. Both of those guys have been hurt this year. And there are a whole bunch of other ones. Zach Littell, who signed with the Washington Nationals, hasn't looked great. There have been a few more. And we're not going to parse through every single free agent pitcher that signed somewhere else over the course of the offseason, but suffice it to say, the Braves have been able to solve their problems internally for the most part, but Reynaldo Lopez was supposed to be part of that solution and really hasn't been. Reynaldo made a handful of starts, 5 of them to be exact, and he was adequate, I guess, but not exactly his overpowering self. The velocity wasn't there, and he had to deal with that coming right out of spring training where he had a very odd start. I think it was against the Twins down in Fort Myers, where he was just throwing 91 miles an hour. And everybody started to wonder, okay, if the guy who's supposed to throw in the mid to high 90s is throwing 91 miles an hour, what exactly is going on with your four-seam fastball, and how bad is it? But to his credit, it hasn't been an injury deal. At least it doesn't look like it. But considering he had major shoulder surgery last year, and I would define pretty much any shoulder surgery you have as a big league pitcher as a major deal. Maybe it wasn't a labrum repair, that kind of thing. They were able to go in and scope it. But anytime a pitcher has a shoulder surgery, it's a big deal. And for Reynaldo, he has been able to work himself back to a certain level, but we haven't really seen what we've needed to see thus far. And the Braves decided, hey, we're going to go a different direction. So Reynaldo Lopez goes out to the bullpen. You got Martin Perez getting more starts. You get J.R. Ritchie called up from the minor leagues. It's been interesting. And I was curious. So I asked Walt Weiss, where exactly do you see Reynaldo right now? This relief thing has worked for him in the past, but he's going to have to be able to throw multiple days. It can't just be this guy's out there working on stuff, and then we got Didier Fuentes over here in a different box where we're just trying to be kind of responsible about his innings and where he goes. You're going to have to start using some of these guys. Otherwise, if you're a major league manager who's got basically 6 relievers to work with, that's not the place that you want to be. So let's have Walt Weiss explain a little bit about where Reynaldo Lopez is and what he's seeing these days.
I see Lopey trending the right way. I think the last few times out, the stuff has ticked up. So, you know, he's in that kind of hybrid role right now where it makes it tough because he can go multiple innings. But at the same time, you know, he was out there trying to find his way, so he wasn't getting a lot of the leverage. So trying to find a niche for him. That being said, he's pitched in some big spots for us out of the pen, and he's capable of doing that. And I think, you know, he's looking more and more like himself. So he's definitely trending the right way. The velocities have been much better the last few times out. So, yeah, I think it's all positive stuff with Lopey right now.
Have started seeing some 95-mile-an-hour fastballs from Reynaldo, but the consistency of what you need and where you need to be. And look, in 2024, he was tremendous, kind of ramping his fastball between basically 93 and 97, but he had the ability to rear back and say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and line up the radar gun here because that's the pitch I think I need here. And we just haven't seen that version of Reynaldo Lopez since he came back. A peak of the numbers, 3.58 ERA in 30 1/3 innings. He doesn't look like part of the problem, and I'm not trying to say that he is, but He just doesn't seem to look like the same guy right now, and that's a big reason why he's out there in the bullpen working on some of those things. As you look at the longer-term picture and how some of these pieces fit, whether that is A.J. Smith-Shawver or Hurston Waldrop or at some point Spencer Schwellenbach, what does that mean to the Braves rotation? Well, it seems like for Reynaldo Lopez, those innings might be at a premium. What does it mean for Grant Holmes, though? I'm kind of wondering, because this is a guy that, there were a couple of starts where you looked at it and thought, all right, first time through the order, he's been dynamite, but that second time through is a little bit problematic, but he's got an elite slider. So this guy's got a role to play. And he proved on Saturday that role could be starting pitcher sometimes. But he could also be a heck of a weapon out of the bullpen if you need to get 5 or 6 outs and get some swing and miss. That could be a first-world problem for the Braves to have if they decide that Grant Holmes could serve them in that role, and I'm sure that he would. I'm sure that he likes starting as well, but I'm sure that he could be a good part of the Braves bullpen if they were to choose to do that. But an interesting guy to keep an eye on in the bullpen for now, anyway, is Didier Fuentes. He's been working on improving his arsenal and serving the Braves in a relief role many times, multiple innings, because they are trying to keep him somewhat stretched out, I think. At least that was the idea to start with. But Fuentes may be, arguably, the 4th best option or talented arm down in that bullpen. 2.70 ERA on the year, 19 1/3 innings with 21 punch-outs, 7 walks. His work in relief, though, an ERA just over 1 in 10 outings. And he's got a 98, 99-mile-an-hour fastball, and we're going to talk a little bit more about him, I'm sure, when I have Gaurav Vedak of Battery Power join me in just a little while. But let's hear what Walt Weiss had to say about the development of Didier Fuentes and what he's been able to show the Braves here in 2026 after, I think, getting thrown into the fire a little bit as a 20-year-old last year.
I've talked about how he's tweaked some of the secondary stuff, still working on the split change. That's a work in progress, but that's the next piece of his development. He threw a few last night, which was good to see, but I like the role he's in, and I think it's the most valuable role for us as a team right now, and really for him. He could be in the minor leagues, developing as a starter. There'd be some value there, too. But, you've heard me say I do believe there's some value in young starters working out of the bullpen early in their career. I think there's a lot of value to that. So, and I think we're seeing that with Didi. At the same time, he's growing, developing, and helping us win games. It's really it's a win-win.
That's an exciting arm to watch, that's for sure. So Didier Fuentes, part of the solution right now in the bullpen. We'll go in depth in the bullpen a little bit later on in the show, but when we come back, we're going to go down on the farm and talk about some of the most exciting young players in the Braves system. Rob Vedak of Battery Power going to join me here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Now, back to more From the Diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back once again to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game, live from the Kia Studios on a Sunday as we close out the weekend. It's been a rather rainy Memorial Day weekend thus far, but hopefully the Braves will continue to dodge those raindrops and be able to close out their series with the Washington Nationals and then enjoy a day off. So maybe the Braves will be cooking out on Monday. But I'll tell you what's been cooking is the Braves minor league system this year. It's been a banner year, I would say, for some breakout prospects. And to help me break some of those down, I've got Gaurav Vedak joining me, a friend of the show. We've known each other for quite some time. We talked about a lot of prospects over the years, Gaurav, and I think we've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today.
Easily one of the best times we'll have. It's been a long time since we've been able to talk this positively about the farm system, so really looking forward to talking about it with you today, Grant.
Well, let's dive on into this because we're going to go down on the farm. I do promise that. We just set all of that up, but I've got to start with one of the top young arms for the Braves who is making a name for himself in the big leagues thus far, and that is Didier Fuentes. Younger than some of the other Braves pitching prospects by a lot in some cases, but already in his second tenure with Atlanta. We saw him briefly last year. A rather ambitious promotion is what I'll call that. Didn't work out for him a year ago, but all he's done, Gaurav, since then is take that experience, get to work, make adjustments, and then put the talent that he has on display here in 2026. So I guess my question is, what are you seeing from this young right-hander, and how excited are you about his future, given what he's been able to accomplish in a rather short time this first couple of months?
Extremely. What he's done over the last 2 months has been incredible. He's become a key cog in this Atlanta Braves overall, not rotation, but pitching staff as is. And what we've seen from him this year isn't too different from what we've seen in the past. And that's a very overpowering fastball with an IVB of 21 to 22 inches at 97 plus miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And then a wipeout sweeper and a really good developing splitter or changeup that he sometimes calls it. What we've seen so far this year is that's really shown differently is the improved command. For Didier Fuentes, it's never been an issue of does he have the mental makeup? Does he have the arsenal? It's always been, can he consistently throw those strikes in the upper part of the zone and get that sweeper away? And what we've seen this year is he's a lot more calm on that mound on a big league stage. And now his talent has caught up with his work ethic. And really, the sky is the limit for this guy. I think once he goes back into the rotation, he's going to be a mainstay in that Atlanta Braves rotation for a very long time because he's got 3 really good pitches and he's capable of adding more should he need it.
Another pitching prospect that we've seen get to learn at the big league level this season is J.R. Ritchie. A ton to like here with how he competes as well as his mix and the makeup overall. I think everybody was impressed with what he was able to do in his time thus far. This first stint with Atlanta, he was optioned back down to the minor leagues, but I think there are a lot of other, considerations that go into those kinds of moves, clearly with the moving pieces in the Braves pitching staff and plans in general. But I think for him, it's just dialing up the command. The control is really what he's going to need to get on a roll with, because if there's one thing that hurts him a little bit, it does seem to be that gets away from him at times, and there can be a few too many walks, and that's an invitation for trouble at the big league level.
Absolutely, Grant. I really don't have much to say outside of that. JR's known for his command and his control of all of his pitches. And again, when you're going from AAA to Major League Baseball, there are some added emotions, and it's going to be a little more difficult. The quality of at-bat that you have on an at-bat basis is so much more difficult versus the international league. So it's going to take a little time for him to really hone in and become the JR that I have seen over the past couple of years. But there's no doubt in my mind, he's someone that has mastered the art of pitching. He knows that maybe he doesn't have that true plus pitch, but he's able to sequence, 4 or 5 other pitches in a single at bat and get the same kind of outcome. So with JR, he's got a great head on his shoulders. He's someone that is able to pick up coaching tips extremely quickly, and someone that is going to put in the time and effort needed to be a long stay in Major League Baseball. So JR, again, really happy to see him take off really quickly. I didn't expect him to really open the season with Atlanta, but he's got a long career in the big leagues, and getting that first glimpse and showing out what he's capable of is just a really the start of things. Once he gains that confidence and has better control of all of his pitches, we're going to look at someone that is going to have a very long career and provide a ton of innings for the Atlanta Braves.
Talking Braves prospects with Gaurav Vedak of Battery Power, among other places, here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. And I want to dig into the main event here. We talked a little bit about some major league guys that we've seen thus far this year, even if they're not in their final form just yet. Player development is trending in some very, very encouraging directions here in 2026. Tate Southisene is absolutely rolling, and he's flashing all the skills in his first full season with Low A Augusta. It's all the columns. It's stolen bases galore. It's power. It's speed. It's on-base skills. My goodness. Gaurav, were you prepared for this immediate breakout season after his brief, but albeit very quiet debut last year?
So the debut last year was more of a surprise just because I didn't expect him to start in full season baseball. Mm-hmm. Typically, when you're a prep player, you're going to be in complex ball for your first professional year, and then you make that jump in the next year. So Tate, obviously, very impressed. He impressed the coaches at the very beginning. That's why they felt like he was ready for Augusta. And, we saw the numbers. It wasn't that great. He comes into this year. The strikeout rate has plummeted. All he's done is show exactly the type of player he was in high school, but now against professional players, which has been ridiculous to really see. Like you said, he's hitting for power. He's being able to hit both fastballs and breaking pitches. He's not expanding his zone. He's not chasing balls up high. He's not chasing out wide. You can sometimes, maybe one or twice a full game, get him up high with a fastball, but other than that, he's not going to expand. He's doing great against all types of breaking balls. He's shown that double plus speed with 33 stolen bases. I had really high expectations for Tate coming into this season just because I believed in his profile, but he has already exceeded those expectations. Yeah. It was an absolutely fantastic first couple of months, and really it becomes, what is his untapped ceiling, and what will the Braves have to do to make him recognize it? Because it looks like Tate might be a very, very special kind of player.
It definitely does, and you can see if they weren't afraid to put him into full season ball upon drafting him last July, then obviously aggressive promotions could be in his future, or again, I'll call them ambitious promotions, but you have to earn those, and you definitely have to prove that you're ready for that next level, and we have seen no shortage of Braves players get to Double-A, and then just come straight on up to the big league. So you can't rule that out in his future either. But still some boxes to check, still some things to do, but an incredible start to the season for him. And we haven't really been able to talk about a position player doing the things that Tate Southisene is doing, let alone multiple position players in the Braves system doing exciting things. And another big prospect who's turning heads is Eric Hartman, a prep slugger who was taken in the 20th round out of Alberta, Canada in 2024. Now, older heads like myself who remember when the rounds of the draft basically went on until teams completely tapped out. It could end up in the 60s, like Mike Piazza, for example. But 20 rounds is as far as it goes these days. Breakout season for Hartman is happening in high A Rome. Power and speed. He's hitting for average. He's getting on base. He's pushing his way into top 100 lists. Tell us about Hartman and just how good you think this kid has a chance to be.
I wish I could really answer that question because he's already exceeded every single expectation I had for him coming into this season as is. So I'm really interested in where this season goes overall. What we've seen Eric Hartman do this season is make a ton of right swing decisions. He's not just like Tate Southisene. He's not expanding his zone. He's not chasing nearly as much as he was last year. The ability, again, just like Tate, the ability to recognize both the fastball and different types of breaking pitches. I've seen him hit curveballs. I've seen him hit sliders. And then on top of that, when there is a mistake anywhere close to the zone, Eric Hartman is taking advantage of it. So what we're seeing right now is a very, very mature 19-year-old playing well advanced where you would expect someone of his age to. He's making all of the correct decisions in his approach. And even when something might come apart one game, he might have a couple of strikeouts. It's not getting to him. He's not really sitting on any kind of bad performances. Instead, the next day he's ready to attack and he's ready to be the Eric Hartman that we've seen so far this season. So with him, it really is the sky's the limit. He's got that true double plus speed, and it looks like that plus power is becoming potentially double plus. So the Braves, what I will say is very interesting is the Braves have been very aggressive and have been playing him at center the entire season. So the defense isn't quite there yet, but with his incredible athletic ability and his double plus speed, you can see him getting to balls that maybe your prototypical 19-year-old wouldn't get to. So it's a very intriguing skill set in that he's looking like someone that can hit 20 plus home runs. Well, let's say 30 plus home runs, 30 plus stolen bases, while potentially also providing really, really good defense. So it's hard not to get very excited about Eric Hartman because, again, the process that he's been doing has been correct. But it is important, again, it's only been, a little over a month, and we do need to temper those expectations a little bit. But it's really hard to not be excited about someone that is doing the right thing regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, first 6-7 weeks of the season, tons to be excited about. And again, a huge start for Hartman with High A Rome. And now I do want to go back down to Augusta and do something that I don't know that we've really had the ability to do the past few years. And it's not talk about another pitching prospect. It's talk about another hitting prospect that I'm intrigued by. Luis Guanipa was another name a lot of Braves fans might be familiar with because he was a big international signing not long ago, finally putting some things together. And it's important to remember he's just in his age 20 season, so still growing into his power and growing up in general and flashing some great base running ability, hitting for average, doing a lot of things that you wanted to see from him, that it looked like he was starting to maybe put some pieces in place a year ago, but the power certainly wasn't there, and now all of a sudden it is. So it seems like maybe, Gaurav, it just took a while for Guanipa to adjust to pro ball, and that's the case sometimes when you talk about these international signings who are extremely, extremely exciting raw talents, but need to start to get the polish and build the skills and the disciplines that turns them into great baseball players.
I couldn't have said it better, Grant, myself. And it's important to provide the context that essentially when these international players are first coming over, they're only really seeing fastball slider. They're not seeing a ton of different pitches. So it's a completely different mindset mentally just to prepare for a single game when you're coming to play pro ball. Combine that with the fact that Luis Guanipa has struggled with just random injuries almost every single year. It's been really difficult for him to get a long stretch of games where he's consistently seeing at-bat after at-bat. He's able to make improvements. He's able to work on different things. He's not missing drills and practice and things like that. What we've seen so far this year is he has stayed healthy. And all of the positive things that he had been doing the past couple of years, which has been his swing decisions, his ability to make contact, his defense, that has continued to show. And now the improvements from being able to be on the field all week long, being with coaches all week long, not having to sit for weeks at a time, his game has completely taken off. And like you said, I think he's now one below Alex Lodi's for the team lead in home runs. He's doing fantastic on the base paths with the stolen base. He's not getting caught nearly, I think it's like 2 or 3 on the season so far. Again, making the right decisions. The next step for him is drawing those walks, because it's a little difficult because he's got such great contact ability, but we just need to see that uptick in walks just a little bit. And then he's really that 5-tool prospect that the Braves thought he was going to be when they signed him, and for I think it was $2.5 million a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and it's important to remember, again, just to kind of double down on this in the case of Guanipa and really a lot of these international prospects, is that you're exactly right. They're not seeing the kind of pitchers they're going to see in pro ball, so there is that adjustment. I mean, you can flash back, and I'm not making this comp to do any disservice to Guanipa, who I know is certainly watched the career with Ronald Acuna Jr. with the same enthusiasm we all have, but first couple of years for Ronald, he dealt with some injuries, including a thumb injury in Rome that cost him a good chunk of that season, and the power really wasn't there for him. 4 home runs per season in each of the first couple of years. Now, 55 games, 42 games, obviously not a lot, and then the breakout in 2017 happened, but this does appear to be that kind of trajectory where a couple of years, some experience, the ability to kind of start to polish those skills and really learn how to use them and where to point them, and all of a sudden you've got a really special and talented player on your hands, and that does seem to be the case with Guanipa. So let me ask you this as we close out, Gaurav, Vedak, who else is on your radar here in 2026, prospect-wise, that we should be bookmarking as Atlanta's farm system, as we open up here and can say easily, it looks like it's in the best place that it's been in maybe a decade when it comes to both quantity and quality, pitchers and hitters?
There have been actually quite a few players that have really impressed me, so I'll be super quick. Top of the list, you have to go with John Heel. He's up there with Tate, Southisene, and Eric Hartman in terms of ceiling and how the decision-making process for him is right on every single step. So you start with John Heel. You can talk about Diego Torrance, Owen Murphy. Briggs McKenzie just got started down in the FCL. Luke Sinar just recently started his season. He's someone that has 4 to 5 different plus pitches. Again, very intriguing. Connor Essenberg as well, very intriguing. Potential corner outfield plus power plus on base percentage type of guy. Dixon Williams has taken a massive step forward. Isaiah Drake as well. Eric Hernandez, Ethan Bagwell has been one of the most impressive pitchers to start this season. You go all the way down to Michael Martinez, who's really shown off the past couple of weeks. A very intriguing, again, international player that has the potential of having double plus power, really good on base and on base percentage. So for the first time in quite some time, you have multiple position players all the way down, into the top 40 that I see have potential to make impacts on the major league level.
That's a very exciting place to be. The Braves obviously dealt with some international sanctions for a while, had some differences, I think, of opinion and where their direction was going as a farm. And then one of the things that contenders do, you trade those pieces away oftentimes to finish off your major league club, because that's the window that the Braves have been in. But now it does seem like they've been able to obviously be very competitive in 2026 at the big league level, while simultaneously having built some really special things over the last couple of years, especially in their minor league system. Gaurav, I really appreciate all of your time. Let everybody know where they can check out your work and how they can follow you.
Absolutely. You can find me over at Battery Power, where I write, or I actually do weekly segments with Locked On Braves, and I will be starting with Braves Today, a once a month special talking about just minor league baseball. So I'm pretty much everywhere on social media right now at GVDAC. So please come by and talk baseball.
All right, please do. We are like-minded in that, and that's at GVEDAK. If you want to follow him on formerly known as Twitter, currently known as X. In the future, I have no idea what they'll call it, but on the socials, that's where you can find him. Gaurav, really appreciate all of your time as always, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thanks so much, Grant.
All right, that's a look at the Braves minor league system. When we come back, we will turn our attention back to the big league club as they close out Memorial Day weekend over at Truist Park. That comes your way next, right here on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Back to Grant McAuley for more From the Diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game as we roll along on a Sunday afternoon. Braves and Nationals going to wrap up their Memorial Day weekend series And then the Braves are going to be off Monday before they hit the road, and we'll talk a little bit about what is ahead of them, a trip up to Fenway and a trip to Great American Ballpark, where we'll get our first look at the Cincinnati Reds on this year. But as we've talked about throughout the show, the different areas of the team that when you add it all up, add up all these pieces and all these groups, have the Braves sitting on the best record in baseball as we are now a third of the way through the season. As of the outcome of Sunday's game, 54 games will be in the books, and the Braves come in 36-17, their best start since the 1997 season. So we're starting to get into that 3-decade territory of, hey, when's the last time this happened? This feels a little bit like it did a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, I guess now, 2023, when you started talking about, okay, look at this Braves team, maybe the best one since when? Well, 2003. Now, this current iteration of the Braves lineup may not be able to outslug the considerable work that was done by the 2023 team, but they are looking about as good as they have looked at any time since then. And with the exception of 2023, this is one of the better Braves offensive groups based on the numbers alone. And if you really look at it, the fact that you could be getting some more when Ronald Acuna Jr. really gets going, and I do believe that'll happen. And you could be getting some more when Austin Riley gets going, and I do believe that'll happen. He'll find that consistency that he's been looking for. The work's happening. And then you add it to Matt Olson and Ozzie Albies and Michael Harris, and you get Drake Baldwin back. But it's not just about the big names either that you might be familiar with who've been with the Braves for a while and the guys that you had the huge expectations for. The Braves have also made a series of moves that have paid major dividends. One of the biggest was the late spring signing of Dominic Smith. He was just hanging out there looking for work. And as we heard, once he did sign with the Braves, he had to go through quite a personal tragedy with the loss of his mother. But he was able to get back to it, win a job, which is exactly what she would have wanted, and then to come through with a huge hit to introduce himself to Braves fans everywhere with a walk-off grand slam. You don't see those too often. So heck of a way to start. But it wasn't just one big hit for Dominic Smith. No, he has had plenty of big hits. He has been really the beneficiary of a lot of at-bats in the DH spot because the Braves don't have that one guy the way they had in recent years with Marcell Ozuna. Now you can kind of move that around. You want to DH Drake Baldwin some? You can. You want to give a different position player a day every week or so to get off his feet but still have his bat in the lineup. You can do that. But you didn't really have anybody you were looking at thinking who's going to take up the majority of these at-bats. But Dominic Smith has stepped into that role, and he has excelled at it. Batting .327 coming into Sunday with an OPS just shy of .870. 5 homers, 23 runs knocked in his 42 games played. And we saw in Miami. I mean, this guy can put together a professional at-bat for you. 12 pitches, and on the 12th one, you hit a 3-run homer. I was impressed by that. And if that wasn't enough for the encore, he had a Little League home run where he hit one out to the gap and a couple of Marlins outfielders collided. It was originally called an error, but common sense prevailed, and it was called a triple and then a throwing error that allowed him to circle the bases. But as you saw, when Dom Smith just laid there face down after the head-first slide, he had given all he could to that play, and it was one of the many highlights of the Braves taking 3 out of 4 against the Miami Marlins in that series and heading on home where they had another exciting walk-off win against the Washington Nationals on Friday. But Walt Weiss has talked about the bit of a balancing act that he has for trying to get a lot of his players at bats. And this, I would say, again, is one of the deepest teams we've seen roster-wise for the Braves position players with the opportunity for pinch running, for pinch hitting, and for platooning and playing to different guys' strengths. But Dominic Smith is playing so darn good. I think the question came up, and it deserved to be asked. You think we'll see Dominic Smith more against left-handed hitters? And Walt Weiss explained a little bit about the philosophy of making out that lineup card with regard to Dom Smith and some of the other pieces.
You know, there may be a DH opportunity against a lefty here and there, but for the most part, I think his at-bats against left-handers will probably come against relievers for the most part. But I feel like Dom is in a really good place, swinging the bat really well. So I feel comfortable with him up there against left-handers. But we'll see how it plays out moving forward. It's a little tougher to get everybody involved right now because, we got Ronald back playing the outfield, so someone's an odd man out. I'm trying to get keep Yaz in there and keep Dubon in there. You get Kim. Don't want to forget about Jorge Mateo. It's hard to play all 13 position players on your roster consistently. It's almost impossible. But I try to find ways to do it because I want to keep everybody involved. So there's some juggling against the left-handed starters, trying to keep everybody involved. So, but it's not out of the question that Dom can get some of those in the future.
And I do like hearing that, and I have liked the way that Walt has stuck with Dominic Smith in particular. rather than pinch hitting for him early on because you knew he might have a chance to come back around and hit again in the 8th or 9th inning if you needed him to. So that, I think, was meaningful as well. You heard the mention of Yaz. Mike Yastrzemski has been hitting the ball extremely well over the past couple of weeks and picked things up over the past few games with some big clutch hits as well. He was hitting 200 through his first 38 games. No homers, only 6 runs batted in, and OPS somewhere in, I think, the 550 range. Not what you're looking for there, but in the 10 games since the start of the Cubs series, which he had some big home runs in that one, Yaz batting .391 with 3 doubles, 3 homers, 8 runs knocked in, and 4 walks and 7 runs scored. That's a pretty good 10-game run and a little more indicative of the player that we were seeing swinging the bat nice and free and easy and productive when we watched Yaz in spring training. But there are just a lot of different players who have played a role. Jorge Mateo has gotten starts at shortstop. Those are going to be a little bit harder to come by now that Hassan Kim is back. And I know he started off slowly, but there again, it's a lot of baseball left to be played. He's a good glove. He runs the bases well. And he's got the opportunity to, just like some of these other guys have, figure out a time to get hot, and then the numbers will start to look maybe a little bit more normal than having a rough go of it your first 10 or so games back. But either way, you've got some versatility. You've got some different pieces. I mean, Mateo off the bench, speedy guy, can steal a base. Led the AL in steals a couple of years ago. Eli White is a speedy hitter who can win the game with his legs in late innings or come off the bench, and we saw be involved in a nice little rally. Just everybody has a part to play, but nobody has played more parts, I think, and done it more adeptly than Mauricio Dubon. And Walt Weiss talked a little bit about what makes Mauricio Dubon so special. The versatility, yes. The ability to hit anywhere in the lineup, yes. But there's something else that he does extremely well. I'll let Walt explain.
I do think there's something to that. You know, people want to, shoo away at the clutch gene or whatever you want to call it. But I do think there's something to it, especially when there's a track record. My best guess is that just in those moments, there's a lot of emotion, a lot of adrenaline attached to those moments. And some players get carried away with that, and some players use that to fine-tune their focus. And I think those are the guys that are the clutch players, the guys that can take all the emotions of the moment and kind of tunnel it into fine-tuning their focus in the moment. And I think that's my best guess of what the clutch gene is. Being able to control the emotions and the adrenaline of the moment.
And I don't know that anybody has done it much better than Mauricio Dubon this year. He has had 48 at-bats with runners in scoring position. He's driven in 27 runs in those spots. And if you're wondering exactly how good that is, this is a guy whose career high in runs batted in is 47 in a full season, and he's on pace for over 90 right now. So Mauricio Dubon is doing his thing, and with that in mind, I had the opportunity to catch up with the Braves super utility man to see how he's liking Atlanta, how he's fitting in, and what he is seeing from the Braves as they take the field on a daily basis. A lot of folks, I guess, around baseball probably look at Memorial Day as kind of that maybe unofficial checkpoint of how things are trending in a season. Pretty fair to say that as you look at the Atlanta Braves here in 2026, you guys are off to an incredible start. What do you kind of attribute that to in your time with the team, kind of getting to know with these guys and now having gotten to play with them for about a third of the year?
I think it's just, just like you say, everybody knows each other. I think just, playing for each other, man. I think we have fun going out there and everything. I think that's the biggest one. Just, everybody gets along and everybody, just go there and have fun right now. I mean, everybody's trying to pull for each other. If one guy doesn't do it, the other guy will.
Yeah, and that's kind of indicative of the kind of comebacks like you guys had in the opener against Washington here. You're a unique player. I'm sure you've heard that a time or two because you can play just about anywhere. Walt Weiss said he can hit you just about anywhere in the order. When did you kind of realize as you grew as a player that versatility could really be something that could set you apart?
I think, early in my career, people always tell me, like, no, it has value, and arbitration process comes and, it shows it doesn't. Like, it shows that it doesn't. And then, little by little, we start playing winning games and meaningful baseball, it does. It does and everything. And it's something that, I'm proud of that. And, it's honestly, it's pretty cool, being able to be one of the unique guys in the league that they're able to do that.
I know you're the guy that goes out there and does it, but was it even at all surprising to know that you could win a Gold Glove from playing 5 or 6 different spots in the same year?
Oh, what's funny? No, I always tell actually there's a text from my wife. I told him, like, I know if I can play one position, I know I can win a Gold Glove, and then, Rollins came up with the utility Gold Glove, ended up, being taken care of, 2 of those, and then, it's something that I take pride of that, and for me, it's always, just try to help the team win, and it's showing a little bit.
Does it feel like maybe just in a short amount of time that you've been able to really kind of connect with this team? Because from the outside looking in, it seems like you guys have a really strong bond. And like you said, guys are playing for one another, and then being able to pick each other up, that's kind of in the DNA of a team that does the kind of winning you guys are doing.
Yeah. I've been winning with some winning teams, and I think that's been the most common, denominator of everything. Guys getting along on everything. I think that's in spring training, everything click, and some guys that come, and I think AA has done a great job too. Putting the right guys too. I tell people it's a great chemical mixture of everybody, just everybody coming together.
Well, last one for me. A lot of times there's a lot of focus on guys that have been here for quite a while, but yourself, Dominic Smith, Mateo, a number of different guys have stepped in and really played an important role on this team. I think that speaks to the kind of depth as well. What does it say over the course of a long season to have guys that are capable of stepping in and doing that, especially when you have to deal with injuries and setbacks and things of that nature?
No, it's like I say, AA did a great job bringing everybody and bringing the right guys, and at the same time bringing good people. I think that's been the biggest one. We help out each other. I'm not playing, I try to help Mateo. Mateo's not playing, try to help me out. Some stuff he sees. No, you're just trying to say you're trying to pull for each other. At the end of the day, we want to win. We want to win a World Series, and I think that's the biggest one. Just trying to help each other out.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, and good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you.
Always great to catch up with the guys that are out there on the field doing it. Mauricio Dubon has really, really connected with this club, and I think the fans have gotten a very good indication of just how valuable he can be in the field with the glove and in the clutch. If you're OPSing 950 with runners in scoring position, you're doing a few things right. All right, we'll talk about the bullpen a little bit when we come back on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Taking a look around the league with more of our From the Diamond with Grant McAuley.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation. Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back in one more time to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. I want to talk about another area that has really been a strength for the Braves thus far this year, and that area would be the bullpen. I was looking, as I often do, on social media at some of the stats and things that get posted because there have been a lot of good stats, and hopefully I've been able to provide a few of those for you about the 2026 Atlanta Braves. But I saw National League ERAs as a reliever with a minimum of 15 innings pitched by my buddy Minsub Mitchell, who really eagle-eyed this whole thing because the top 10 ERAs among relievers, and I realize ERA, kind of a guidepost and maybe a bygone era. There's a whole lot of other stuff we can look at, including the Baseball Savant page. Trust me, I understand. But at some point, an indicator of how many earned runs you're giving up is still one that I'll look at and say, okay, is he giving up a bunch of runs or is he not? At least it gives me the table of contents for how this pitcher might be throwing. But I looked at top ERAs. Number one is Raisel Iglesias. He has allowed 0 runs this year. Then you have Kyle Hurt of the LA Dodgers at 0.60. Mason Miller, who you might have heard about since he throws about 117 miles an hour and strikes everyone out. He's a 0.76 ERA. Then there's another Padres reliever, formerly Robert Suarez of Atlanta. Jason Adams of the Padres is also on there. Then Didier Fuentes, who we talked about earlier, having a lot of success in the bullpen, a 1.10 ERA for him, right ahead of Dylan Lee's 1.11 ERA. Antonio Senzatella is number 8 of the Colorado Rockies. Tyler Phillips of the Miami Marlins, and then Huáscar Brozoban of the New York Mets rounds out the top 10 NL relievers in terms of ERA. So top 10, 2 Padres, 4 Atlanta Braves, a couple of Dodgers. Just kind of lets you know, if you're talking about the upper echelon teams that are expecting to be there when it matters and have the opportunity to win in October, well, you're certainly talking about the Dodgers. And if you're talking about the NL West, you can't talk about the Dodgers without talking about the Padres, at least not in recent years. And, of course, the Braves have kind of been involved heavily in what goes on in October over the years, with the exception of 2025. They just like to get a little bit further this year. And a lockdown bullpen is a good way to do it. So what is that going to look like? Well, there have been some moving parts this year. And unfortunately, one of those that just flat out didn't work out was Aaron Bummer. He was released by the Braves after getting bombed in Game 1 in Miami. Regression, it really came for him. And if you are one of those folks like me who does look at Baseball Savant, and you looked at Aaron Bummer in 2024, you saw one of the best relievers, I'm talking elite level, at not allowing hard contact, at getting a ton of ground balls, and at missing bats. And unfortunately, that script was completely flipped on Aaron Bummer, who went through a shoulder issue last year, had a bunch of inflammation, then missed a bunch of time. He came back this year, a lot of hard contact, not enough ground balls, at least not at fielders, and the home run ball started to fly. And the strikeouts were also no longer piling up for Aaron Bummer, who was never an overpowering guy, but he had a way of really confounding hitters with the type of pitcher that he was. But it wasn't happening this year. Once elite at doing all those things I mentioned, getting a lot of swing and miss, couldn't do any of it. He has been released. He's free to sign anywhere. The Braves do owe him $6 million, though, unfortunately. So there is that whole thing when it comes to that. But what do the Braves do in the meantime? Because they're going to need another lefty. Dylan Lee, currently the only one working out of the bullpen regularly, because we're not trying to put Martin Perez down there just yet because he's been too valuable as a swing man and as a starter. But Dylan Dodd came off the injured list, and I talked about this way back in spring training. I think Dylan Dodd could play an important role for the Braves this year. He's been a bit of a reverse splits guy, meaning that lefties hit him a little bit better than righties do. But if you watch Dylan Dodd pitch on Saturday, for example, you can see it. It's there. He is really, I think, refined his arsenal. He's no longer throwing a straight four-seam fastball anymore. He's throwing a sinker, he's throwing a cutter. And that's been one of the things that I think has been a differentiator for some of the young pitchers who once thought, okay, well, I got to run one up there 95, 96, and I'll work a whole bunch of pitches off of that. But no, if you really change the shape and the style of your fastball and throw multiple ones, look what it's done for Bryce Elder. He can still throw a four-seam fastball some, but he can also throw a cutter. He can also throw a sinker. Then he can back that up with a slider and a changeup. Looks pretty good. Now, you don't have to do all that in the bullpen per se, but I think Dylan Dodd has really, as he is, kind of graduated to the big leagues, no longer on prospect lists, didn't carve out any role as a starting pitcher, but the Braves have found that he could be a valuable arm relief-wise. So if he can stay healthy, I think you've kind of solved that problem of at least having a couple of different lefties, even if one of them is kind of a reverse splits guy, at least for now. Because I think that the cutter and the off-speed stuff could play up a little bit more against lefties as he gets more confident with it. So Dylan Dodd, again, could be a factor as far as that goes. At the end of the bullpen, though, for the Braves, as I talked about, they did look human on Friday, but as I just laid out a whole bunch of numbers and names there, Robert Suarez and Dylan Lee both allowed late runs, but along with Raisel Iglesias, I want to add all of this up. Talked about the top 10 relievers in terms of ERA. Well, you'll find Raisel Iglesias at the top. You will find Robert Suarez at number 4, and you will find Dylan Lee at number 7. This is National League relievers, again, top ERA. But pile it all up, 62 appearances, 5 earned runs allowed for the 3 of them. You talk about a 3-headed monster. And I remember, a lot of Braves fans will remember this as well, when you had Craig Kimbrell, Johnny Venters, and Eric O'Flaherty. Folks called that Oventbril. We haven't come up with a very clever name yet for Dylan Lee, Robert Suarez, and Raisel Iglesias. Maybe we can workshop that one on social media. That's one of the good things we can do on social media. There are a lot of bad things we can do, a lot of petty things we can do, a lot of unnecessary things we can do, but who wants to live that way? Just want to throw that out there. 0.72 ERA by that 3-headed monster. That is some impressive stuff. Only 11 walks against 68 strikeouts across 62 and a third innings as well. So really impressive work by that Braves bullpen. And as I talked about some of the moving parts, you got Reynaldo Lopez down there kind of trying to sort some things out, but if he can figure out a way to at least be a consistent reliever, you don't have to necessarily use him in leverage spots, but it sure would be nice because he's got some experience. More experience than, say, Didier Fuentes. But what does Fuentes have that Lopez and a whole lot of other pitchers don't have? The ability to rear back and throw 99 or 100 miles an hour at will. So how are you going to deploy Didier Fuentes moving forward? Can Reynaldo Lopez play a role? And if Dylan Dodd is also able to step into this, all of a sudden you stack him with those other guys that I've talked about, the top 3. And then you've also got Tyler Kinley, who I know some folks were dumping on him because of some bad outings that he had after, I think, being used quite a bit and also kind of overexposed to left-handed hitters where his one weakness is home runs against lefties. Tyler Kinley has given up 4 home runs this year, all of them to left-handed hitters. And unfortunately, for most relievers, there's never a great time for a home run. I think if we were to run a quick straw poll among fans, that's one of the things they like the least. Relievers who come in and walk guys and relievers who come in and give up home runs. Just not a big fan of either of those things. But with Aaron Bummer struggling so mightily, I think that pushed Tyler Kinley into a little bit of a larger role. Might have been used a little bit more than you'd like. But he is going to face lefties and righties in some important leverage situations, and maybe he's had a bit of a reset and will be able to kind of get himself back on track because I really like the arsenal for Tyler Kinley. But as Walt Weiss has, I think, really been doing, and the front office is involved in this, there's a lot of research that goes into it. There's a very capable coaching staff. Jeremy Hefner's working with these guys on the pitching coach side of things to put players in a position to succeed by matching them up in the right spots. Same thing that we talk about with this guy pinch hitting and this guy starting and this guy platooning and whether or not Dominic Smith will get more bats against lefties or not. It's the same thing that you're dealing with when you're trying to manage that bullpen. Only the thing for the pitchers is you got certain guys who aren't available. Now all of a sudden, your plan, your best laid plan, may not be available today. And it ain't going to help you tomorrow. And Walt said something really interesting yesterday, I thought, about how he approaches trying to stay out of extra inning games. He's not managing the game along thinking, okay, I got to save somebody for the 10th, save somebody for the 11th, save somebody for the 12th. He's basically saying, I'm going to take all my chips, and I'm going to push them in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings and try to avoid that thing altogether. And then if we get there, we got to figure it out. But basically the whole thing's a crapshoot because in the infinite wisdom of trying to get rid of long games, which, I don't know, I'm not necessarily arguing against it, but the games that would destroy your bullpen because they went on for, 17, 18 innings, we don't see too many of those anymore because we put runners on second base for free to start extras. I think it was Jeff Francoeur, probably a lot of other people that have said it, but what if we were to just play the 10th and maybe the 11th normal? And then if you get to it, starting in the 12th, you put a runner out second base. This whole thing existed in the minor leagues to start with because your minor league pitching development, just saying this as somebody who's been down there, you do not have the same depth. You are not able to make a whole bunch of roster moves. You're not able to just simply say, hey, we got worn out, so we're going to just call 2 guys up from the level below us. Nope, you're not. You're just going to have to figure it out a way. And unfortunately, that usually means some poor pitcher or 2 or 3 is going to have to wear it one night because you just have to figure out how to get through that day's game because you played 19 innings the day before. I don't think anybody's clamoring to have those back, but I will say I kind of miss every once in a while maybe having that marathon game if you turn up on the wrong side of it. And if we're using the pitch clock, isn't it going so much faster? What's the conversion rate for that? Can we now play 14 innings in the time it took to play an old 9-inning game? If so, do we really hate it? I don't know. And you don't have to answer it. And neither do I. Because it's just one of those little things I've gotten off into that's probably not going to benefit us whatsoever. But the Braves, once they get done with the Washington Nationals, will hit the road. There's a 6-game trip coming up. It is going to start against the Boston Red Sox on Tuesday at 6:45, and the Braves did release their probable pitchers. It'll be Spencer Strider in Game 1. It'll be Bryce Elder in Game 2. It'll be Chris Sale in Game 3 on Thursday. Once the Braves are done in Boston, they'll be done with the Red Sox for the year, and they will head out to Cincinnati, which will be, I would imagine, one of the more favorite stops for the Braves offense, or really any offense that gets to go to Great American Ballpark. The Cincinnati Reds will host them in a 3-game series Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Then the Braves will come home, have another off day on June the 1st, which is crazy to think. It just feels like opening day was not that long ago. We're closing in on the month of June here. But 3 games against Toronto and 3 games against the Pittsburgh Pirates are what's next for the Braves as the month of June gets started. But that is a look at what is coming up for the Braves. I want to thank again my guest in this show, Gaurav Vedak, for joining me. Battery Power. We got to talk a lot about some Braves prospects really rolling. Tate, Southisene. If you got a chance to get up to Augusta, might want to go ahead and do that. If not, though, you might be able to get a chance and go see him up in Rome with Eric Hartman, who has also been absolutely tremendous this year. But I appreciate Gaurav chatting with me about all of that. Also want to thank Mauricio Dubon for his time and, of course, Walt Weiss for answering the many, many, many questions that he gets peppered with day after day after day, including some of my own. You heard a lot of that. And we'll be back with you next Sunday. You can subscribe to From the Diamond wherever you get your podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app. And, of course, 2 hours of Braves and baseball talk is coming your way a week from now. Until then, I've been Grant McAuley. So long, everyone.